Hello, Barbara here with Day 2 lesson for MFT's Camp Create 2019 Session 1. My lesson is titled Remarkable Resist. I'm going to show you two ways to do the emboss resist technique with cards using them both. So let's get started. For the first card, I'm going to start by stamping Captivating Mandala background on some watercolor paper with Versamark, and then I'm going to heat emboss with clear detail embossing powder. I've already planned the off-center position, so I'll just place my paper in the MISTI, double-check placement, and then stamp. For my watercolor medium, I'm using two Ken Oliver color bursts because the intense color they give. I'll stamp the mandala several times to get the best coverage I can, since I'm using the textured side of the watercolor paper, but I'm only showing stamping once to save time. Because it's textured, there will be some areas not covered, which adds a bit of distressed look, which I like. If you prefer, though, you can use the other side for a smoother look. Once that's done, I'll sprinkle on the embossing powder and tap off the excess. A coffee filter or folded sheet of copy paper is a good way to catch the excess powder and return it to its container. Once it's done, you'll be able to see the powder sitting on the cardstock. And now I'll take it off camera to heat up. And here you can see how shiny the melted powder is. Now let's watercolor. These color bursts are very intense, so you need very little of it, as you'll see. I'm tapping a bit into palette cups, and then I'll add water to activate it. There doesn't seem to be much there, but you'll see I actually mixed up way more than I needed. I'm just squirting a little of water out of my water brush, just a couple of drops actually, and that's plenty. And then using the water brush, I'm adding watercolor and diluting it as I go with the brush, working both colors until I'm happy with them. Spreading the color causes the embossed image to show up as it resists the pigment, allowing the design to show white. There's no formula for how I do this. I just add color here and there, pulling some blue up into the green and some green down into the blue to get as random a look as I can. Heavier in some places and lighter in others, while trying not to mix it up too much since that will muddy the colors. Once I get it like I want it, I'll set it aside to dry. You can dry it with the heat tool, but that does tend to warp the paper more than just allowing it to air dry. And while that's drying, we'll work on the next method. I do like little pools of it between the embossed areas. I think that adds a nice little touch and a little bit more texture and dimension. Now, for this next one, I'm going to be heat embossing as well, and I'm going to be using the all lined up background the same way I did the mandala, only this time I'll be stamping on smooth cardstock and sponging it with dye ink to expose the design. It's really important to use an anti-static powder on smooth cardstock to minimize stray powder, so I did that first. I find that if I rub the paper with the powder bag fairly vigorously, it does a better job of cutting static than just patting the powder on. Again, I only show once, but I stamped several times with Versamark for optimal coverage. The MISTI makes it easy to stamp several times, or any stamp positioner, and so I would certainly recommend that. Sometimes you get some small pieces of debris in the Versamark, and it's best to remove that before you do the heat embossing. Any pointed tool will work. Now I'm going to apply the clear powder, tap off the excess, And again, we'll take it off camera to melt. You'll be able to see the texture in just a minute with the powder in place on the VersaMark. Once that's done, you really can't see the embossing on the camera, but I'll sponge MFT Premium Dye Ink and Lemon Drop, Orange Zest, and Grape Jelly, and the background will emerge. I'm speeding this up to save time, but I'm starting with one color and then I add the others, and then I go back and forth blending each edge into the other. The heavier you apply the ink, the more the design shows, as the embossed design resists the sponged ink and it soaks into the cardstock. For ink, I usually wipe it with a paper towel to make the embossed design show up more. And then you can always go back and add some more. Now let's make some cards with these two panels. I see the watercolor design as serving as the focal point of a card, while I see the sponged panel as a background. So that will play into how I keep the layout, how I design both cards. Since the mandala will be sort of a focal point, I'll keep the layout simple to allow it to shine. First, I'm going to adhere the panel on a card base with foam tape. I've already cut Hello Die-namics 3 times from Sweet Tooth cardstock and stacked them with spray adhesive, and stamped and heat embossed a sentiment from Greetings and Salutations stamp set on vellum cut with Skinny Strips Die-namics. So now it's just a matter of putting it all together. The sentiment strip is adhered with little dots of liquid glue, and then the Die-namics sentiment was adhered with spray adhesive. The simple design lets the emboss resist mandala show to its full advantage. Now for the sponge background. I'll also adhere it to a card base with foam tape, but since I'm using this panel as a background, I can get more adventurous with my design. First, I'm adding A2 rectangle frames Die-namics cut from gold sparkle cardstock and adhered with foam tape for dimension. I'm using a size that allows some background to show on the outside for a more informal look. Then I'm going to adhere Birthday Wishes Die-namics that I've also prepped ahead of time by cutting from Grape Jelly, Lemon Drop, and Orange Zest cardstocks and stacking them. I'll adhere them with spray adhesive again, as it allows for adjustment before setting up. I always get a little on the outside, so I'm pressing it down with a piece of non-stick paper. I keep the wrapper from my tape runner refills for this purpose. To finish it and carry out the color theme, I added some enamel dots. And that's it from me for this session on Remarkable Resist. I hope you've enjoyed it and will try it for yourselves.